organic. Just letting the streams go live. It takes about 10 to 12 seconds. Welcome, everyone. Today is Career Happy Hour. It's July 29th, 2022, 3 o'clock p.m. Pacific time. And I'm Andrew Beach. I am a teacher of self-education. I help professionals communicate value to find great opportunity faster, whether they're working or not. And that's through a pragmatic process of branding, planning, and effective networking. And today's topic is really kind of interesting. I was thinking about all the people that influence a hiring process or even a promotional process internal to the organizations you might be a member of, and the process that's involved in making that a reality. And I started to think about the relationships and such that would be formulated, but that's our topic for today's Career Happy Hour. For those who don't understand what this is actually a community. This is an opportunity for those that have served me so well, for me to give back to this community in order to help promote the concept of networking, and also to finding greater opportunities or clarity about our purpose, our meaning, our value, our superpowers, that sort of thing. And so a lot of the topics that you will hear on Career Happy Hour revolve around those kinds of things. And we utilize this system. It's called Restream. And so I'm broadcasting right now. Hopefully the folks on Instagram have been given a solid today. Let me verify that Instagram actually is being serviced today from my profile. Maybe they're not, maybe they are, but I don't see it working here. So maybe they're not. But anyway, so maybe that's something that you all have to do, but I don't know how all of this works. I just set it up and I let it run, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So it doesn't appear that the what they call Yellow Duck is actually working. So I copied their stuff into my Restream and I put it on as live, and I'm not sure if I can actually see it. So if you all could maybe go to my Instagram, maybe that would be anyway, the handle for my Instagram is well, it's right over here. Anyway, good. So I am broadcasting on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and hopefully soon Instagram, if I can figure out how to use Yellow Duck. So if anybody is an expert in Yellow Duck, please reach out to me on any one of these platforms at the URL you see right down here at the bottom left of your screen. So that said, we also share here our LinkedIn profiles. So if you have an opportunity to get in the chat and share your LinkedIn profile, this is a way for us to connect regardless of which platform you might be joining from. This is an opportunity for us to connect and have a conversation and to reach out to each other. Networking is hard enough, I think, that LinkedIn has done a great job of building this platform, but they don't make it easy to connect with people and actually have dialogue. And so if you're attending this session, it's likely you don't have that problem. You like connecting with people, or you find it difficult and you want an easier way to do that. And so we put our LinkedIn profiles in the chat so we can create some kind of, or at least lower the friction and the barriers to people connecting and having, real conversation. So that said, put your LinkedIn profile in the chat. I'd appreciate that. Maybe give an indicator of where you might be joining from. I'm in my home office here, my home studio. We're going organic today. Normally I have a green screen with a beautiful, beautiful background, but this is what the home office looks like when you take down all the veneer, if you will, and this is what you see. So also, there is live coaching available, and I will put the link to the live coaching. If you want to come online literally like right now, you can do that. I will put that in the chat. Looks like Terry's here. Welcome, Terry. You're welcome to join me, Terry, as part of this conversation. I think it'd be really kind of interesting to get your perspective on how different organizations do their hiring and how we as individuals can maybe find the right people and do the influencing, and maybe even what I would call the upstream process to deciding what kind of positions you want to have in your organizations and what the motivations might be to that sort of thing. So Terry, if you're interested, I think you could add a lot to this particular conversation today. And so I will also, because Restream does not bring chat over to the other side, I will come into, hang on, let me mute that tab so you all don't pick up on it. So I'll put the link to join me live on Restream for coaching right now. Or, you can use that link as well. Sometimes it doesn't show up as a hyperlink, so you probably have to copy and paste it into your browser. It'll bring you into the back end of Restream. That'll give you the opportunity then to put in questions in Restream that are in what I would call the green room. And in the green room, you can put private questions there. Just say, hey, when it asks you what your name is, just put anonymous. And as an anonymous person, you can come into the private chat, ask your question. Nobody in any of these platforms will know who you are. And so I will certainly maintain your privacy that way. So come into that link that you see in the chat, or I think the one in the description needs to be updated. I don't know why it keeps changing, but it is what it is. And so that's something to think about. The other side of this is sharing the broadcast. Now, I do this for free, pro bono. It's not aligned with any company that I'm associated or affiliated with. These are my own views, and I proceed in this live stream from that perspective. I'm not the type of person that is going to represent an organization. I represent myself and my own views during these sessions. So that said, that is indeed our process for today. Happy to join the conversation. Okay, great. Looks like Terry's here. I don't know if Terry's ready. He may or may not be ready to join. But let's see if we can bring Terry in. I'm going to have to put on some headphones here, Terry. So bear with me. Otherwise, I won't be able to hear you.
No worries. Can you hear me?
Everybody, who you are and where you're joining from, if you would, please. Are you there, Terry?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay. Tell everybody who you are and where you're joining from.
Well, my name is Terry Smith, and I am joining from northeast Portland in Oregon, not terribly far from where you are, and even closer to the Portland airport. So It is a beautiful, sunny, hot day here again, and glad to be aboard.
Yeah, I think it's the first day this year, in my mind, that we've had an opportunity to have the air conditioning on all night. So. It was one of those days. I was talking to some friends in Arizona. It's like, hey, it's like 85 and it rained here last night. I'm like, wait a minute. Isn't it supposed to be the other way around?
Right? It seems a little backwards.
Yeah, exactly. So the idea for today's stream, Terry, is who is your best friend in job search? And I started thinking about all of the relationships you create in a hiring process as a candidate, or even as someone who is interested in getting promoted inside an organization. So as we wrap our minds around these different relationships, I thought it might be helpful to give people a description, at least from my perspective, and you can add as we go along, who are some of the people that I would want to build relationships with, whether I'm employed or not, in this process. And the first one that came to mind for me, Terry, was the internal champion. And that is somebody in my definition that is somebody known that you have, relatively good relations with. They're able to get you internal job postings. They might even share with you pay ranges, hiring manager names, or even recruiter names. And they may be able to fill you in on any team dynamics. Now, it isn't always that somebody that you know is going to give you this information. So it might be that you have to identify which of the people in your network are in that space. But is that something fair to say that would be a good relationship to commit to?
Yeah, I think so. In excuse me, in the whole job search process, if you identify, people that you can develop those relationships with in organizations that you're interested in being involved in, that helps a lot. It really is, and it's oftentimes it's not necessarily people that you would think sort of intuitively are those folks, but they are people who, I like to think of it in terms of, influential voices, or thought leaders is kind of a phrase that gets kicked around a lot. But there are a lot of people that are in organizations that don't necessarily have big titles or, big roles or what have you, but they're very influential in what they talk about and how they think, and and they oftentimes set a lot of interesting tones. I can think of several examples of people like that over the course of my career who, again, not VPs or anything like that, but just people that when that person talks, lots of people listen, to borrow a phrase from, whatever, some commercial I saw.
No, I've heard that one before too. So
yeah,
the thing that comes to mind for me based on what you said is willingness. And it's not so much these people, yes, they have a pull, I guess, in the organization that people listen to them, but they also have a willingness to support me as a candidate and to actually maybe push or promote me inside the organization, maybe even send an email with my resume to a hiring manager, maybe even coordinate a hiring manager informational meeting or something like that if it's within the corporate parameters. And so to me, an internal champion is somebody that's willing to do those things, and often without you having to ask.
Right. And the sort of the icing on the cake on that is, again, sort of that when that person talks, people listen, right? Finding that person there. I mean, there are people in any organization that, well, they'll say, hey, I know so and so, and you say, oh, that's nice. And then other people in the organization that will say, hey, I know so and so, and I think they would be somebody we should think about or take
a look at. Yeah. So that's a much different approach, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And as you were talking, I was thinking, okay, there's also those people that in this process are more coordinated by nature, right? They're coordinators. And that means they're the people that manage logistics and, make sure calendars line up. And these people, although they may not be your best friend, they are somebody that is integral in a hiring process that you don't want to piss off, because they certainly are taking notes and have an input, and they may or may not put you in the best calendar spots, if you know what I mean.
Or, anyway. They may even do nothing more than say, well, gee, I was trying to schedule this person for an interview, and they were a little rude, a little abrupt, that sort of thing. And that person, not maybe very likely not a decision maker, but has the ear of the decision maker, and even though they may not necessarily have, an influence or impact on the role, they do have an influence or impact on the person making the decision about the role. So my strong advice to anybody in any kind of, stage of the relationship is just be nice, be polite to people. And that comes back to you so well, just as the opposite comes back to you in not so good ways.
And we could safely say, as job-seeking professionals or people looking to advance themselves in their career, that everyone is a potential member of a hiring team. And therefore we're going to teach treat everybody with the same kindness, the same respect, give them the same approach and all of that. And so, not that these people aren't valuable, but we need to know which one is which and what role do they play in this process, and how do we treat each one maybe a little bit differently, because I wouldn't treat a coordinator like I would a peer, right? Unless they are a peer, you know what I mean? And so we can't make assumptions there, but the idea is, hey, this person is just trying to schedule things. They're trying to get me on the map. They're trying to work a process-driven people, right? It's HR. And so if we try to overshoot that particular audience, then sometimes they get confused or they don't understand, and we don't end up moving forward in a process. So
right. Yeah. And those people are hugely important. I mean, as much as it seems like, their job is to kind of schedule things and so forth, that is a linchpin kind of role. And you want to take that person really, really seriously and just spend that extra bit. I would always tell you that anytime you're dealing with somebody who's just, they're scheduling things, even if they're kind of frayed and kind of, had a rough day and they're maybe not in their best, not bringing their best self to the discussion, you want to just, kind of recognize that and say, hey, it's all good, and be very, very comfortable with being flexible with their, with what they're trying to accomplish, because that will get you so much further down the road in the process. Even, and I'm going to kind of lean on this a little bit, even if you don't necessarily have that internal champion, it would be great if you did, but even if you don't, just the difference between being nice to the person who's just trying to get this thing to happen and kind of treating them as though they're sort of a necessary process person or what have you. It makes all the difference. It really does. So
well, and when you consider that this person is likely trying to schedule, I don't know how many calendars all at once, and
right.
they've got some people that are super easy and responsive and put a date in. Great. I might just say, you know what, I'm going to put you in the bottom of the pile, or even in the round file over there.
Right. Yeah. So you cannot overlook or overshadow the folks that do that work, because it's important work. But getting back to the internal champion thing, it's really interesting, having been on the other side of that table a lot. It's absolutely true. I mentioned a minute ago, I can think of people who I consider to be sort of the internal champion types, that when they would come to me, because they wouldn't do it often, right? That person, I'm thinking of one very senior engineer in particular, just super nice guy, really pleasant soul. But he didn't, just kind of put himself out there and say, oh, I know this person and that person. Oh, there's 5 people that want to, that wasn't his thing. If he made a recommendation about somebody and said to me, Terry, listen, I know this candidate, this applicant, from another job that I did, or from a project that I worked on years ago, and they were really, really cool and really, talented and so forth, that I'm going to listen to. I'm the guy kind of making sort of the yay, nay decision there. I'm definitely listening to that voice.
Well, it's the qualitative voice, right?
Yeah, it is.
Because the ATS is, let's be honest, it's a large volume of people, and it is quantitative in nature, and it's kind of hard to discern the qualitative piece in an applicant tracking system. And so in a lot of ways, we take the random nature out of the equation by having somebody say, hey, of this pool of candidates, here's one that I think you should really consider. And I think that increases your quality hire and your capacity to onboard quickly, and the alignment that you might have culturally speaking, because this person is vouching for that individual.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. And the other interesting part of that is when you have sort of that outside connection, that that person that maybe doesn't work for your organization, but has worked with your organization, or has had some interaction with your organization. Because you've seen this, somebody will say to an applicant, hey, I happen to know so and so at such and such a company, I'm happy to introduce you, and so forth. If that relationship is a solid relationship between that third party and the hiring person, that third party voice can also be influential too. So it's really important to as you're going through this process, to mine kind of where you think there might be connections. It's been always fascinating to me. It's a small world, and it's always fascinating to me how I may be saying to somebody I know in a company over here, I'm pursuing this or that opportunity with these folks, and that person says to me, hey, you know what? I know somebody at, that organization. I'd be happy to make a call, or happy to send an email, or happy to just, whatever. That is another aspect of it, right? Is having that sort of that third party connector. It's great to have an internal champion, but exterior champions aren't bad either.
Yeah, I think a champion is a champion,
Absolutely.
And certainly in that domain isn't always somebody inside the organization. Like I just talked to a great recruiter, by the way, about a month ago. No, 2 months ago, I'll say. They work for a large company here in town. She was there on a contract, and she's the most delightful person. She was really promoting me to the organization. She had already said that the hiring manager was really interested in me. And so it was really kind of interesting to have those conversations in that way with a recruiter. And so I had to stop and say, hey, I work or collaborate, or at least interact with a lot of recruiters. And I can say that your approach is something that works, and you should keep doing it. And so it's really interesting how this person, who wasn't even really officially an employee, would actually go out of their way and support me in that way. So it was really kind of interesting.
No, and that's partly, I think, the individual's personality, and the people that are really good at this sort of work and that really take it to heart are going to be more like that person anyway. But the other part of it is, just honestly, if that recruiter who is a contractor working for this firm, and has that sort of that instinct around, qualified quality candidates, that's an opportunity for them to again demonstrate their professional capacity as well, because they're a contractor, right? They're not a regular FTE. Not that that's a differentiator necessarily in their level of commitment, but I've seen it where, and I've had contractors, working for me as recruiters, who, that's been kind of their rhythm, when they'll dig in and they'll really look for that, specialty candidate. And when they find one, man, they're on it. They want that sort of collaborative recognition that, hey, I'm here working for you on a contract, but I am working for you on a contract. I am working for your best interests.
Yes. Yeah, and of course you want to do well and get hired on full time and whatnot. But
right,
I think the thing you brought to mind though is the concept of this service provider company relationship, right? And so a lot of people that I've collaborated with, specifically executive level, they were called on by a lot of different salespeople, a lot of different vendors, and these kind of relationships in your career are really valuable. Because if you end up somewhere else where they don't have a relationship and you're the guy and you help them get there in some way, and that there's a high probability you might actually use their product and service at that company.
Right.
And then the flip side of that is the purchasing people, right? If I'm a salesperson and I'm calling on the purchasing people and I now need a new sales job, they work with other vendors, right? So these different relationships in terms of your career are really valuable, because you may not know, if you're working with vendors, you may not know what the market is right now. You may have been under a rock the last 3 years, or been really loyal to your organization. All these things are really noble and virtuous, but I believe everybody should at least test the market every couple of years to make sure, hey, do I have the skills? Am I getting compensated fairly? Just so they know,
right,
if the organization isn't going to plan my career for me, I've got to do it on my own. And so that idea of a self-directed career, I think, is what's here to stay. And building some kind of portfolio of your own is super profitable.
Yes,
for everybody involved. Good. So the next group that I thought about, Terry, are what I would refer to as recommenders. I mean, these are people that, yes, they have a say. They may be even part of the hiring team. They may not be. It could be a hiring manager. It may be that the hiring manager is a recommender, but the person actually doing the hiring or making the hiring decision is your peer or an executive. So even though this person may be my direct reporting manager, they may not be the one making the decision. And so sometimes it's important to discern who are the people that are actually most critical and most listened to, as you mentioned. So the person that you talked about that is really the one that people listen to, I would call that person a recommender.
Okay.
Right. An internal champion, I think, is somebody that's willing to promote me because they, in some capacity, trust that I can do something that I say I can do, and they're willing to put their thumb on the scale for me.
Yeah. No, that's a good distinction. You're right about that. And you're right. The example I use is more of sort of that recommender kind of personality, who's really good at it, but, not necessarily the champion, if you will. I've had examples of people, and I've actually been a champion of people at various times in my career. And one case in particular that was very unique. The details are, not too important, but it was a situation where I had, and this is just me in my own role, but I had met this candidate that I really strongly believed was the right person for the role. And there were some issues in the person's background that if we went by pure policy, I probably would not have been allowed to, make the hire. But I advocated for this person. I put, I was not the hiring manager. I was the sort of the recruiting leader, if you will. But I put my foot on the scale on that one and said, I firmly believe that this is a talented person that we need to, yeah, I get it. Policy, we don't want to break policy. We don't want to, set bad precedent. But I believe this is going to be, so it's sort of that difference between doing what's right, i.e. following the policy, and doing the right thing, which is make the hire. Made the hire, person was very successful in the organization and was there for years and years after I left and was, very well thought of. So, so that's an example of where you exactly kind of putting the foot on the scale a little bit to say, I believe in this person. I think we need to make this hire, and I was right. Of course, I'm not going to, give an example of when I was wrong.
Of course not. You don't want to disparage yourself on the internet. Come on.
Right, exactly.
We're supposed to have this veneer, right? This,
exactly right.
This curated self.
No, but you're absolutely right. Those opportunities when they come, when you have somebody that fortunately I was in a good spot in the organization where when I said, hey, I really believe this, and I will tell you honestly that my boss was very skeptical. He's a very conservative fellow, and he was like, well, okay, well, tell you what, Terry, basically, if it works, good for you. We'll all take credit for it. If it doesn't work, it's all your fault.
I'm okay with that. All the credit and all the blame. That's
yeah,
great.
no, I'm cool with that, and it worked. So, and part of it is that. Part of it is when you have, that individual, that not a recommender, but that champion that says, I believe this is the right hire.
Mm-hmm.
You have to listen to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so the other roles that come up really are, I think, related to decisioning process. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if you'd have a name for the role, but certainly there's a financial decision maker, right? Somebody that's got the purse strings, and there's somebody that may be evaluating you based on some technical skills, right? So there's different roles that these individuals play that would be dependent upon the decisioning process.
Yeah.
Now, it could be that there's one interview, one person making the decision, and it's very fast. There's also, you could have an initial screen, a panel, and then an executive interview, and then a decision, right? So really, it depends on the organization and how they work this process, but it's important that you understand what that process is. And don't be afraid to ask if you don't know.
Absolutely.
Because people on the other side of the table, they just take it for granted every day that they know what the process is, without first considering that the people on the outside don't know what the process is.
Yeah, and that's super important. If nothing else, just to frame your own personal context around what's happening. Mm-hmm. So that if there's an understanding that it may take this many days before you hear from us, for example, okay, I get that. I understand that, and so, and sort of who has the decisions around, comp is the key sort of financial decision, right? How much are we going to pay for this position? And different companies have, there's thousands of different ways that companies approach that whole thought process. So it's really important to kind of understand what the guardrails are around that conversation, so that, you're coming at it at the right level of energy without overstepping or overreaching, but still advocating for yourself. And hopefully, this internal champion is advocating as well, in the effect of, okay, I really believe this person is an important opportunity for us to bring on board. And I think we need to just do what we can to figure out how to make it happen. Right. And so there's that sort of that interesting synergy where you've got sort of your budget and your internal equity and your all those sort of technical components that go into what that role is allocated to be worth to the organization, which is a whole separate topic. Mm-hmm. But then again, having just the presence of mind to ask the next question, that is, what happens when, who's involved, and how can I help? I guess, one of the ways I like to think of it is, as a candidate, you say, how can I help you, Mr. or Ms. Decision Maker, make a good decision? And the good decision is just about to hire me, but how can I help you with that without, getting over the top?
Yeah. Good. So that decisioning process will lead to these other relationships that you might want to identify and to give, like you said, give people what they're asking for.
Mhm.
And so really that process is kind of the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, primarily because I think as a career coach or somebody that's lived on the other side of the table with candidates, is that I believe in my mind that there's this date of posting, right? This advertisement date where things go public, right?
Mhm.
And then there's a whole process that comes after that. I'm
Right.
more interested in knowing what is the process that precedes that. Meaning, hey, every organization has a process to identify a need, formulate a requisition, get it approved, and then throw it out for advertisement, right? So there's this spot in the process where after which, you can identify that because it's publicly advertised and I know the process. But before that, I think there's a whole host of people that are these same people that you need to identify and build relationships with in advance so that you're not showing up late to the party, if you know what I
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah.
So
No,
give me some counsel on that, and maybe we speak in generalities because we worked with a lot of different companies in terms of
yeah,
the
I think
process.
so I think this is where the champion thing comes back into play,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
so for example, let's use my recommender guy as an example of this, and let's elevate him to a champion role.
Mm.
So in his world, and so he and I are, I've as a candidate, I've identified him, I've started to develop a relationship with him. He and I are starting to really, have that sort of ongoing conversation about, gee, it'd be great if your skills were, and so on.
Mm.
And and he would be somebody that would be in a position to know on his team or on teams that he supports around him what kinds of activity are going on, right? What kinds of issues are coming up. Gee, did somebody just leave the organization, or do we have, the new budget year is starting, and yeah, it looks like we're gonna get some head count. So, we want to be able to get that head count filled quickly. And gee, Terry, I want to be your champion on this because I really think we should hire you. And I've developed that relationship to the point where that champion is now saying, before it even hits the streets, hey, we've got headcount. Hey, somebody left. Hey, this, that, or the other thing, right? But we've got a window of opportunity here. Let's hit it and let's get you in front of the right people before we have to go through the exercise. And maybe by virtue of doing that, we don't even have to go through that exercise, at least to the same
Mm.
extent, right?
Yeah.
That's
Well,
where it's really cool, is when you happen to hit that right individual, that right champion who is listening to kind of what's going around him
and
or
the
her.
timing
Yeah,
is right. Okay.
yeah,
Good.
and
So
now
I'm just thinking through here, Terry, some of the things that might cause an organization to have an opening, right?
yeah,
And we could go through a laundry list, but
yeah,
more often than not, it's someone's gotten fired or got laid off or is retiring, or we could go through all that list, but
yeah,
the ones that I think come up most often is somebody got promoted and they need to backfill a position.
right,
Right. And so that indicates a couple of things to me. There's growth in that organization because someone got promoted.
yep,
And now there's an opening. And so there's work to be done and really nobody to do it.
hmm
And so what are some of the other common things that you've at least seen that would create a need for an opening that a candidate may not be aware of? Right.
yeah, yeah. Well, so to your point, somebody is promoted into a new opportunity, or is transferred into a new opportunity, or the organization maybe is doing some restructuring and they're building new teams around certain product lines and so forth, and they don't necessarily have the full complement of people that they need on each of those teams, and they're still kind of evolving that conversation. That's an ongoing thing. I've been through that exercise just recently with a group where we were going through the conversation of, okay, we want to stand up this team, we have this many people. Of that many people, here is X minus some number that are actually good for that team, but that leaves us with a gap of 2 to 3
Mm.
headcount that need to go to support the product requirements for that. So and that was that well before there was any discussion about let's open a rec, or let's, get some advertising going, or let's post on the web, or what have you. It was that dialogue around, hey, what does this team actually need and what we don't have in place? I mean, we know we've got to go get this product line up and running, but we only have about half the people we need. And we don't have the requisite talent in-house, so we're going to have to go find it outside.
Yeah.
And that was, probably a couple of weeks at least before we even got to the point of saying to the finance people, can we, sort of gamble on the future, spend extra money ahead of that, knowing that we're going to be successful in this product release? And finance said, you know what, that's a good gamble. Let's do it. Boom. Now we have the
financials.
Yes. People saying, okay, go higher. But again, that's a process and it takes time. So if you're kind of
right, so just ballpark, how long does that kind of a process take, where you're looking at a new organizational design because of a reorg, you shuffled out all the people, and now you've identified the headcount gaps and that sort of thing?
Yeah, it really depends on the org, but I would say certainly, sort of from initial thought to rolling out a new, a new org design and so forth, could be a few weeks, could be 2 or 3 months. But it also depends on, again, what that org is trying to accomplish and how fast, right? And there's pluses and minuses to going really fast and something like that. But, it's something that it is definitely a process, especially for larger organizations. We're going to spin this group out into another group. There's a company that is a very well-known company that just spun out last year, an offshoot, and they had, probably 3/4 of the complement of people that they needed, but that extra 1/4 was about 200 heads that they had to go hire, right? And they just, company based outside of the U.S., but they went full on to try and hire this engineering team, kind of in the region that they're working in. So, but from the starting point of are we going to do this, to the point of it's spun out and we're now hiring for it, that was probably a year.
Wow.
In the making. Yeah. So it really depends on the situation, the organization, and so on. But what it speaks to is something that you and I have talked about before, which is that notion of really designing the sort of your as a candidate, your list of organizations that you really want to go engage with and work for potentially, and then really being on top of what they're doing and making those relationship connections into those organizations, so that when that conversation's happening, your name comes up.
Right, because you're already feeding them solutions to the problems they're facing, right? And so, but first you have to know the problem.
Yeah.
And so as a networking connection, you want to really take the temperature of your audience and say, okay, I see, we've been hanging out and doing one-on-ones now for 3-4 months, and I can see there's a lot of anxiety, and maybe they pushed out a meeting once or twice, and I can see that they're really kind of discombobulated. And I asked them if they're okay. I said, yeah, we're going through a reorg. Oh yeah, I've been through those before. Right. And so now, and so I completely understand what's causing you the most heartburn. Right. So now I can just ask questions of a friend in a time of need. And so here I am showing up as friend in time of need, not job seeker looking for employment. Right. And that's a huge difference, because now that's how I build trust. And so as somebody who's interested in paying it forward, I want to be there in just about everybody's time of need, which means I need to have a cadence or some sort of a process of my own. Hey, HR has a process. I need my own process to make sure that I've got, follow-ups put in place, and I'm connecting with people, and I'm doing touch bases or sending them an email or a text message or an edible arrangement. I mean, I go down the list, And so it eerily starts sounding like sales and marketing, right? And that's true. But people don't like themselves to be called a product, or to be productized. And I'm always the type of person that says, hey, if it's a box you want to be in, go ahead, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead and be in that box.
Well, I think too that, there's a natural tendency for us to think of ourselves as, being productized, right? I mean, just by the nature of the way we're characterizing this discussion, and that's, I'm not sure what that says societally, but I like to think of it in terms of not so much of, what is my what or what I like to encourage people to do is think in terms of not what is my product offering, but what is my service offering? How can I help? Right? It's amazing how much conversation you can get into around the simple, how can I help? What can I do? To just help you think this through.
Yeah.
Way back in the day, I had a colleague who had a significant other who was considering a line of business that he wanted to start that he had never been in before. And his significant other that I worked with knew that I had some knowledge about this. And she said, hey, can we maybe go to lunch and just talk about it?
Yeah.
And I said, sure. Next thing I know, I'm doing a consulting gig with him, helping him set up his business, because it was just lunch, right? Like the advertisement. It was just lunch. And we had a conversation about stuff that I knew about, and it helped him kind of think through some things that he hadn't thought of in that way before. And so it went from this friend thing and kind of this, hey, I'm just happy to help you out, to, would you be willing to come on board and do some, yeah, sure. But I think that's kind of what you're getting at, right? Is that sort of, as a friend, how can I help, and where does that take me?
Yeah, I think it's a mindset. And so
Yeah.
the mindset is how can I help? And,
Yeah.
and as a question, I'm not really a fan of that, because sometimes they don't know.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a little bit better to maybe just help them articulate the symptoms.
True.
Well,
Good point.
what are you facing, and what's causing you the most heartburn? Or,
Yeah.
why are you staying up at night? I mean, you've canceled a couple of meetings with me, and
Yeah, we were supposed to have dinner. How come?
yeah, what's up with that? I was supposed to come over to the basement lounge and have cocktails, but
Right.
I haven't gotten the invite yet.
Bar's open.
Yeah, it's always open.
Right. never quite closed.
Yeah. So I guess the suggestion is, hey, have some good questions to ask people.
Yeah.
Especially if you're not used to this kind of relationship building, it's probably a good idea to just start developing your own list.
Well, and the thing that I've noticed too is that, there's really, I mean, it's a cliche, but I'll say it anyway. There's no such thing as a really dumb question. There are questions that, and especially when you go through that exercise of, being new to a situation or new to a scenario where you just don't know. It's okay to ask, and it may be some very rudimentary thing that you're asking about, but yes, think about what are things that you just don't know about that you want to learn more about. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, it's funny, every time I've ever done a presentation on some of these topics, I ask people, if I reached out to you and asked you for help, would you help me? And I've never had anybody say no.
Yeah.
And I always say that's exactly how your network feels about you.
Mm-hmm.
And so the bigger question is, how would you like them to help you that's effective for both of you?
Yeah.
Because the ask for an opportunity or a job or something transactional, that's never worked for me. And for very few of the people that I've coached, it's not worked either. Right. And so the objective would be, hey, how can I be a servant, as you mentioned? How can I contribute? And I'm going to base my success in networking and building relationships on the number of contributions I make to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I do this, right? I don't do career happy hour to fill my coffers full of gold, right? I do it because I have a heart to serve other people. And so if something comes from that, great. If nothing comes from that, okay, I do what makes my heart sing.
Well, that's the best part of it, right? Is that if you can, if by virtue of something that you've said or done, somebody's life has, some level of positive impact, then, as they say, my work here is done. I've done what I needed to do, and it's made sense.
Are you saying it's time to go?
No.
Well, we've only
Never.
been on for 45 minutes. I mean,
No,
gee,
it's
we could probably talk another hour on a lot of different things.
easily, easily. But yeah, but it's that, it's that sense of, gee, am I going to get rich doing this? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? But am I going to help somebody who needs some help, or
Mm,
am I going to maybe provide some increment of additional value that mushrooms? That's the thing I'm always intrigued about, is that, you can have a conversation with somebody and you can ask that question that says, you know, what is it that's keeping you awake at night? And even if, they answer the question and you talk about it and you come up with one little thing, one small thing that just shifts one thing in their world, but that leads to other things that shift in their world, right?
mhm.
That's better than gold.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's that's kind of like a coaching approach, right? And so when you get into those situations, it's best to ask questions and not make bold statements.
Well, yeah, and I found myself just very recently in a couple situations where I was just confused about, what was going on. And I had to kind of stop the conversation and say, okay, look, I just have a couple of fundamental questions. I apologize in advance if they seem like they're, and I shouldn't do that, but I did.
Yeah.
But these are the questions, right? These are the things that I'm just missing in this conversation. And it was amazing how, the people on the other side of the conversation were like, oh, that's a great question. Let me tell you how this works. And then it was a revelation. But it's that asking the right question, right?
Well, it helps an audience also clarify their position
Mm-hmm.
when they may not have a sounding board to do that. You're
Well,
that sounding board, right? And so as a candidate or future candidate for an organization, I want to be the sounding board. I want the person that's being approached to ask opinions or to provide input. And so then I
and I would
become
add,
a trusted confidant, right?
yeah. Well, and I would add one other thing to that too, which is sometimes, when we're talking about just asking questions of people, sometimes it is worthwhile to ask the question, even if you think you know the answer already.
Mm-hmm.
And there's two reasons for that. One, you may not. And two, to the point you just made, it helps them to articulate what, the nature of whatever the comment was. Sometimes I'll even do that in just internal meetings where I'll ask a question just because I want to hear that person tell me in their words what we're talking about, and it's remarkable because, and I'm not trying to challenge them. I'm just trying to help clarify and understand, and I can think of a couple of examples recently where, people have come away from the conversation and emailed me back later or texted me later and said, I really appreciate that you did that because I was confused and I was afraid to say anything. So
You just beat them to the punch, right?
Or just, yeah, they just weren't gonna ask. And so I'm just going to be, I can plead new guy here. I've not been in any of your meetings before, so I don't know. I don't know what that acronym means. Can you tell me what that means?
Yes.
So that sort of thing, right?
Yes. Well, again, there may be some things that are taken for granted, and so it's not out of bounds to ask those questions. And the other side of that is they may think they're communicating properly their challenge or their angst, but because you asked and they articulated it, they got some internal perspective.
Right.
So external perspective, I think, is super valuable, especially in a job seeking situation, because I want to know what people think about me from their perspective, so that I can then spin that around and spit it back to people as I'm communicating in that organization or in the domain that I have expertise, because it may be that I'm not clear on the value I bring to an organization or the problems that I solve because I haven't gotten that external perspective. I've only got my own.
Right.
And there's a lot of validation that happens when you ask people's perspective or opinions on things, even if you know the answer, because the answer might have changed.
Right. Right. or or you may have a pretty good handle on the answer, but what they tell you gives you some perspective that you may not have had before.
Yes. All in all, good things, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Good. Well, I think we did a good job today, Terry. So I'm going to congratulate you for being an active participant in Career Happy Hour.
Thank you very much.
Good to have you back.
What's that?
Good to have you back.
Good to be back.
You're kind of quiet for a while there, so I'm sure you were busy and working and whatnot. But
yeah, well, and my schedule seems to be in a kind of a mode where this is more operable for me. I can do this more often. So
okay, good.
I'm happy to join.
Awesome. Well, if you come up with any topics, let me know.
I will.
Okay. And we encourage you also, members or participants, to put any questions you have in the comments or in the chat. I'll be monitoring those even after the session. So you're welcome to put them in there. I'll make sure that you in some way get an answer. Or if your question is a good one, we might actually do an actual career happy hour on that particular topic. So your input is appreciated. All right, Terry, have a great weekend.
You as well. Thanks so much. Take care.
Yep. Well, I do appreciate your attendance here on Career Happy Hour. Remember, share this out to your friends, your family, to your social networks. Send it in a private message. Getting the word out about this community is what matters. And my handle, for what it's worth, is right here at the bottom right of the screen. So if you want to, go ahead and connect with me on any of the social networks that you value, and you will find me there. And we'll see you next Friday for Career Happy Hour. Bye now.